and welcome to Darvanalee Designs Studio. For those that don't know, my name's Nicole Reed and today I'm going to show you how to take your all shall be well stitch and turn it into this cute little round cushion. So let's get started. Okay, so you're going to need a few things today to finish off our little cushion. You're basically going to need your front panel, that's the stitchery that you've stitched out. You're also going to need a matching piece for the backing, and I'm just using the same as my front. And you're also going to need your gusset, so that's a strip of fabric. Now my gusset is 3.5 inches wide, and that's including my seam allowances, so by the time I finish sewing it into the cushion it'll be about 3 inches. Okay, you're also going to need some sort of marking device, a tape measure. You're also going to need some scissors and a rotary cutter, and maybe a couple of rulers, and you're definitely going to need some pins. You can also have some extras like pinking shears, but they're not necessary. And you also, to stuff your pillow, you're going to need some polyfill as well. Alright, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to find out how long our strip is going to be, and to do that all we're going to do is we're going to fold our stitchery in half, and then we're going to find out what the radius of our circle is. And to do that, all we do is we measure that, and whatever you're working in, so I'm working in centimeters today, it is 25 centimeters for me, or it is 10 inches for anybody else. Okay, so basically we divide that number by 2, and that will give me, in centimeters it will give me 12.5, and in inches it will give you 5. Now in the pattern I will put that you will have noticed there is a mathematical equation in there, and that's how you find out what the circumference is of your circle here. Alright, so we now have to find out what the total length of our strip's going to be. So all you do for that is you put in what your, so you just grab a scientific calculator if you've got one, and you can see on here I've already put it in. So if you put 2 pi, which is this little symbol just here, and then the number, which is 12.5 if you're working in centimeters, or 5 inches if you're working in inches, and then that will give you a number. Now for me it is 78 and a half centimeters roughly is what I need. So if you don't want to do all the math equations and all the rest of it, you can actually just cut a strip of fabric, the width of the fabric, and then you can pin it to it, and don't forget to add 1/2 inch to the length for your seam allowances. All right, so that is how you get your amount that you need. And I have done that earlier, so I've got my strip here, and now all I need to do is I need to go over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and then I'm going to press those seams open. So first of all, you want to reduce your stitch length down. I'm going to reduce mine down to a 2. I wanted a small stitch because I am pressing the seams open. Okay, so I'm going to head over and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch. If you're new to sewing, you can always just put a 1/4 inch line from the edge and mark that, and then just stitch on that line to make it nice and easy for you. So when we come back, I'll have that stitched. Okay, so I've got that sewn together, and you can see there that if I pull it apart you can't see the stitching. Alright, so the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your stitchery or your back piece, it doesn't matter which piece you start with. I'm just going to start with the stitchery, and you're going to flip your strip so you can see the wrong side of your fabric. So there's my pretty side and there's my wrong side. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to fold my stitchery into quarters and just finger press them. Okay, and then that's what that's going to do. It's going to give me some matching up points. Okay, so again I will just pop a pin in here where those creases are, and then I know that they're my 1/4 points. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to do exactly the same thing with my strip. So where my seam allowance is, that's where I've sewn. So that gives me 1 point at the opposite end, and I'll pop a pin in there, and then I'll put one in where the seam is, and I'll pop a pin in there. And then what I'm going to do is then I'm going to fold that in half again, making sure that there's no creases in the fold or anything like that. And then I'll just run my finger down, and that's just finger pressing it. And then what essentially that's going to do is that's going to give me a couple more crease marks, and then I can pop my pins in there like so. And then that's going to give me my 4 points on my circular piece. And now all I need to do is I have the circle here that I've cut, and all I did to get this circle to, which I don't think I said at the beginning, is I just traced around my embroidery hoop. So the hoop that I stitched in, I traced around the outside of it, and that's given me my 10-inch circle, and it's a 10-inch embroidery hoop, so you can see here. So I used the blue part, which is the outer part of the ring on this particular one, and I just traced around the outside, and that's given me a 10-inch circle. Makes it super easy because I was stitching in it, and it was just, yeah, made it super easy actually. Alrighty, so now all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little circle that I've created here with my strip, and this is our gusset if you're wondering what it's called. Okay, and then I'm just going to line those pins up like so. So getting my raw edges together, making sure that they're all aligning up, and then I will just match up those crease marks and those pins and pop it in place. And then I'll come over here and do this one as well, again lining up those raw edges, and then this one. Okay, so the key points here is to make sure that you start lining up those quarter points. Okay, it's going to make it super easy to ease in the circle that you created with your strip to create your gusset. Okay, now you don't have to have a 3-inch gusset if you don't want. If you just want a little bit of a rise in it, you can make it a little bit smaller. The size is up to you. If you want a bigger pillow, then just use that equation that I have included in the pattern. And then that way you will be able to find out what the circumference is of whatever size you want to do it. Okay, a good size though for this is the 3-inch size. So don't forget also to add your 1/2 inch extra in if so you've got your seam allowances there. All right, so then all I'm going to do is I've placed those quarters on and they're right sides together, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my pins and slowly ease all this fabric in. And I know that this is sitting circular and even, and I'm not going to get to a point where I'm going to have a bunch of fabric that I have to sort of try and ease in. So hopefully this is all making sense to you and you can see what I'm doing quite clearly. And before you know it, you're going to have a gorgeous little cushion. And when it comes to circles, the more pins, the better. The less movement you've got, the better off you'll be. Okay, and just take it nice and slow when you are sewing on the sewing machine. I always have my needle in the down position as well. So if I do have to move my circle or anything like that, I'm not going to move off off the line that I was sewing. We're just going to be using a 1/4 inch seam allowance for this as well. So you can see there that I'm using a lot of pins. And I'm just pinning all that excess fabric. And don't worry about this bit here because we're going to put our back on, and that will ease into, we're going to do exactly the same thing with the back, and it'll ease in nicely. Okay, so you can see there that we've got that stitched all the way around. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch all the way around. Now we don't need to leave a gap on this one because this is the front of the cushion. Okay, when it comes time to putting the second one on, we're going to actually leave a gap. All right, so as I said, I'm going to head over to the sewing machine, keeping that small stitch in place. So I'm using a 2 on my machine, so just play around with your machine to see what size that you can get. Okay, if you've done our foundation paper piecing, you want it like that, so it's a nice tight stitch. Okay, so hopefully I'm getting that across to you. So we're going to start anywhere on here, and we're going to do a back stitch at the beginning and also at the end, and we're going to go all the way around. Okay, so I've sewn all that down. You can see there that it's got a nice small stitch on it, and what that means is when I put the pressure of the polyfill in, you can see that that's not going to give. All right, so the next thing that we need to do, because this is a circle and we want it to sit nicely when we turn it out, we're actually going to pink the edge of our seam allowance here. So pinking shears are these jagged edge scissors. Okay, you can find them in most clothing departments of craft stores and stuff like that. If you're not sure, just go into Spotlight or somewhere or Joann's and just ask for some pinking shears. They're the best invention ever. I love them. They just clean up your edges. They stop fraying. You can use them on the edge of fabric, like your stitching and all that sort of stuff, and it just stops all that fraying. Now you might be asking why I didn't cut the circle out using the pinking shears, because I didn't want to upset the amount that I needed for the seam allowance. So I always do it after I'm stitching. Now alternatively, if you don't have pinking shears, all you need to do is just go all the way around and just put little V's without cutting into your stitching, just like so. As I said, it's exactly the same as what I'm going to do with the pinking shears, except it's a little bit more time consuming. So all I'm going to do is I am just going to grab my pinking shears, and then without cutting into my stitching, I'm just going to go right around the circle. So you can see there I'm not going into my stitching at all. So what's going to happen is, one, it's going to stop it from fraying, and two, it's going to make it easier to get that circle to sit in a circle shape and not have weird looking edges and whatnot. So just be very careful not to cut in to your stitching. Okay, so there you go. That is all the edges nice and pinked. And what I do at this point is I just run my fingers along my seam. So I don't know if you can see that or not. I just get my seam and I just run my fingers along that. And what that's going to do is that is going to help me ease it out when I need to turn it out the right way. All right, so that's our first part done. All right, the next thing that we need to do is, you can still see that we've got our crease marks there, okay, for our quarters. The next thing we need to do is take our backing. But before we pin that on, we want to flip it over to the wrong side, and we're going to leave a small gap. Now, there's two different school of thoughts of this. Some people say, you know, leave a larger gap so it's easy to turn through. Other people say leave a smaller gap so it's easier to sew together. I'm of the latter. I prefer to just have a smaller space. So for this one, I'm probably going to do it at about 2.5 inches. Maybe a little bit more, maybe 3 inches. And I'm going to turn my entire cushion out through that hole. But then I've only got this amount to stuff it, and also this amount to hand sew as well, because there is a little bit of hand sewing in this. All right, so basically all we're going to do now is we are going to find our quarters. So we're going to fold it in half, our circle, and again, and try not to have your where you're going to stuff it on any of those points, okay, because it just makes it easier if it's not. Okay, and then I'm going to, as I did before, place a couple of pins in there, and you can see that my opening is over here, away from those pins. No real reason for it. I just find it easier that way in my head how to put it together, that's off to the center and it's not near any of my major. Well, it's not near a seam for one, because we've got our seam on our gusset, and it's just sort of in the middle of between the 2 points. Okay, so you can see here that we've still got our creases there, so I can line up that one. And we're doing right sides together again. Okay, so our pretty sides are touching our pretty sides. And then I've got the seam one over here, so I can pop that in. I've got this one hiding under here. Pop that in there. And then this one on this one here. So I would advise that your gusset, when you do it, I just finger pressed it, but I've got false nails on, so it makes it really easy to press it. If you can't get a really good crease in your gusset when you first start, just hit it with the iron and put those creases in there, and it'll stay there for you. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm also going to put a pin here, a pink one, okay, because I know that I've got to leave this opening. So I've got my 2 pink pins there, okay, and I know that that has to stay open. So I'm not going, when I start sewing, I'm actually going to start here and come around to this one and finish here. Okay, and as I said, it is just a small hole that I'm leaving there, okay, but that is because I don't want to spend too much time sewing that together. And the reason I have the gap on the back is so you can't see it from the front, because sometimes our hand sewing can be a little bit much to be desired. All right, so all I'm going to do now is I'm going to, like I did before, ease this circle into the back, remembering to leave that opening, because if we don't leave an opening, we cannot stuff our little pillow. Just taking your time. Okay, so you can see that that's all pinned in place, and as I said, I've got these 2 different color pins here, okay, and that is going to remain open. So I'm going to start at this pink pin here, and I'm going to do a back stitch. It's really important that you do a back stitch, because we're about to put pressure onto this seam when we go to stuff our little cushion. And then we're going to sew 1/4 inch all the way around to this next colored pin, and then we're going to do a back stitch there as well, and then we'll be ready to stuff our little cushion. Okay, so that is now all sewn together, and we have our little gap there to stuff it. But the first thing we need to do is pink around. Now I won't actually pink this bit here that we're going to close up. I will basically just fold that down by 1/4 inch and make sure that I don't pink it, because it'll make it harder later on to stitch it together. Now when you are stitching in your sewing machine, make sure that you move your stitching away from the needle area and go slowly around, because you do run the risk of running this front section over. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to now pink that area. I've back stitched, so I know that that seam should not come open, and I'm just going to start there, and I'm going to snip in on an angle, and then I'm going to continue on with pinking the edges. So you can see there that I haven't snipped that opening. So what I'm going to do now is I will just fold that down a little bit, and also that one, and just give it a bit of a finger press, and that'll just give me a guideline when I go to stuff it and sew it together. Alright, so I'm going to get rid of all my little scraggly threads and everything like that, and now I can turn that in the right way. So just pushing through that opening and gently going, because it is a smaller hole. If you feel that you need a bigger opening, by all means do that. So again, I'm just going to run my finger along that seam and get it to lay a little bit flat at the front and also at the back one. So you can see there, I'm just running along that seam with my fingernail, and it's just getting it to sit a little bit flatter. And then I'll do the same with the back one as well. So you can see there we've got a nice little gusset in it, which is good, because this if you wanted to sit this on a shelf or anything like that, it'll sit up on a shelf quite nicely. Alright, so we've got that done now, and now the job is to actually fill it with polyfill. So I just get small pieces at a time, and I just start filling that up, and I just push it in with my thumbs. And I get either a long ruler or a chopstick, and that'll push in once I start getting some more in there, and I get it right down into the bottom edges of it. Okay, so once you've got it to your desired amount, like how firm you want it, and mine's pretty firm, like it's packed in there pretty solid, okay, what you want to do is you just want to roll it backwards and forwards so you can get that stitching to sit a little bit flatter and more in a circle, because you may have got it your polyfill not so even. Okay, so once that is all even and you're happy with it, which I am right now, I'm very happy with it. So you can see there, it's a nice little nice little cushion for on my bed. Now what you're going to do is we're going to grab some needle and threads. Your general sewing thread will be fine, and we are going to seal up this hole. Now I'm not going to bore you with how to do that. Okay, I have got another video linked at the bottom of this video, and also up in the cards here, of how to sew this, how to sew these closed, so you'll be able to see that video there to make one of those pin cushions, and there's an in detail video there on how to close this hole up. All right, so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pinch that together, and I'm going to pop a couple of pins in there to hold it in place. And I've folded the fabric over so the raw edges are folded into the inside. It's a little bit fiddly and a little bit tricky because you're working around that polyfill. And then the middle, I always do the two ends first because it's just easier once they're secured in place. And then I will pop a couple of extra pins in there, push any bits down that aren't playing nice. All right, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do an invisible stitch along there, and then it'll be finished. And there we go, it is all stitched together and our cushion's ready to use. So basically you just want to do an invisible stitch for that, and preferably down the bottom. So mine's right down the bottom here, and basically that's just going to sit on my bed like so. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do hope that you enjoyed making this little cushion that we've put together for you, and how to put a gusset in. I know there's a little bit of math, but we also told you the cheats way as well. So I do hope that you enjoyed this video today. If you did enjoy this video, give us a thumbs up down below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon beside it, and then that way you won't miss out on any future posts. And for those that don't know, my name's Nicole Reid for Darvanalee Designs Studio, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye for now.